All right, hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study. Excuse me. A plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter of the countdown to the death, burial, and resurrection. And so there's a lot of challenging that the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they all get together and try to trap Jesus. One of the statements we're going to see here, as you can see by the title, is to um, um, render to God the things that belong to God, and render to Caesar the things that belong to Caesar. But the statement sometimes people use to try to say that, that means we can, long as, if we keep God out of, I guess, whatever we're doing and we're rendering to the world, then that's okay. And that's not what Jesus was talking about. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in the verses. So let's get to it. Luke chapter 20. So, verse 1 says, one day as he was teaching the people in the temple complex and proclaiming the good news, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders came up and said to him, tell us, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? Now, the question comes as if you remember back um, um, in chapter 19, he goes through, if I can find it right quick. He goes through as what is called the triumphal entry, but I'm trying to think if I can find it right here. Remember, he goes through the temple complex and he throws them out of the temple. When he says here, he went to the temple complex and began to throw out those who were selling. And he said, it is written that my house would be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. Okay, so this is why they come to him and they ask the question, well, who has given you the authority to do these things? And as usual, this was a setup question. It was designed that if he said that God, or I am God, then they could try to bring him up on treason. One of the things about what the Romans, when the Romans would conquer a people, in some respects they were kind of liberal to them. In other words, they could retain their culture to a degree, but they did not tolerate insurrection. In other words, Rome was over you, and that's what you had. So anything other than this is part of what the Pharisees and the Sadducees were installed. The Romans allowed them to have authority, but their main job was to keep Israel in check. Okay, so now by them asking this, they were trying to set him up. So verse 3, he says, he answered them, I will also ask you a question. Tell me, was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Now, remember, you go back, remember the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they all came into John's baptism, and they were all watching John's baptism. And at one point, somebody from the audience asked him, are you the Messiah? And he says, I am not. Now look at this here. Verse 5 says, they discussed among themselves, if we say from heaven, he will say, why didn't you believe him? But if we say from men, all people will stone us because they convinced John was a prophet. So they answered that they did not know its origin. Now, and Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you about what authority I do these things. And this is a classic. I experience this all the time. That when people want to believe something, or when people are confronted with something, and you ask them a very simple question, notice how they deflect. Notice how they decide. Notice how they deflect and from answering the question. Now, what's also interesting is how do they know what Jesus would have answered? They said, if we say from heaven, then they said, why do you believe him? Now, it's, I think, a logical conclusion, but Jesus could have said, okay. But it kind of also shows you their guilt. In other words, they're not, notice, notice the reasoning that they come to and then reject. Why didn't you believe him? Why didn't you believe the baptism of John? You are Israel's leaders. You are students of the scripture. Why didn't you believe? So, all right, verse 9 says, then he began to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard. Now, the word vineyard here, always remember, as Jesus is talking, he's talking to the Pharisees. He's talking to Jewish leaders. So he is using Jewish language. And this word vineyard comes out of the Old Testament, that God said that Israel is my vineyard. So always keep this in mind. Don't try to add things to the interpretations, which many people do. In other words, let's just understand plainly what the scripture is saying. A man planted a vineyard, leased it to tenant farmers, and went away for a long time. At harvest time, he sent a slave to the farmers so that they might give him some of the fruit from the vineyard. So see the analogy about the Old Testament, Israel, the vineyard is Israel, and the children of Israel are the fruit. But the farmers beat him and sent him away. By the way, the slaves here will be the prophets. Okay. Verse 11, the slave sent him away empty-handed. He sent another slave, but they beat that one too. He treated him shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent yet a third, but they wounded this one too and threw him out. The owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him. But when the tenant farmers saw him, they discussed it among themselves and said, this is the heir. Let's kill him so that the inheritance will be ours. So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed them. Therefore, what will the owners of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those farmers and give the vineyard to others. But when they heard this, they said, no, never. Why? Oops. Why would you say that? Okay, even in the analogy, why would you say no, never? I mean, just look at the story itself, because they knew that he was speaking the story against them. This is what you would call, if you throw a stone into a pack of dogs, the one that yelp is the one that got hit. And there's a lot of yelping here. I mean, why would you say no, never when they did evil? But he looked at them and said, then what is the meaning of this scripture? The stone that the builders rejected, excuse me, this has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and if it falls on anyone, it will be grind to powder. It will grind him to powder. Okay. Again, another scripture that they knew well. I think this is in Psalm. Psalm 118. Verse 19 says, then the scribes and the chief priests look for a way to get their hands on him in that very hour, because they knew that he had told the parable against them, but they feared the people. Never underestimate the fear of rioting. They're going to use that when we see, as Jesus is arrested, how quickly you could ignite a riot. Okay. And by the way, the reason why they did not want to ignite that is, again, because this is the very thing that the Roman government had them installed to keep insurrections down. Verse 20, they watched closely and sent spies who pretended to be righteous so they could catch him in what he said, to hand him over to the governors, rule and authority. So again, notice, here they are looking for a way to trap him. These holy, righteous men, they question him. Teacher, we know that you speak and teach correctly. Liars. Because if that's true, then why aren't you following him? And you don't show partiality, but teach truthfully the way of God. So they're just outright liars. Because if that is true, again, why aren't you following him? He said, is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But detecting their craftiness, he said to them, show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription does it have? Caesar's, they said. Well then, he told them, give back to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. And they were not able to catch him in what he said in public. And being amazed at his answers, they became silent. So Jesus again shows his wisdom, right? And as he shows them his wisdom, give to Caesar. In other words, you hand him a coin. Okay, this is Caesar's coin. Give it to him. But give to God. And you're women. And they were not giving to God the things that belong to God. Okay. Now he's not finished. He's going to go on, and they're going to tempt him some more. He says, some of the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection. Now let's stop for a moment and look at that. There is no resurrection. Okay. There is no resurrection. So some of the Sadducees who say there's, so this is a starting point with them. Now the Sadducees were part of the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin was the ruling body of Israel. And so you had the Sadducees, and the Pharisees, and then you had some other group in there. The Sadducees, of course, and the Pharisees were the dominant group. The Sadducees were the larger of the group, but the Pharisees were the more pious ones. They were the ones who had held strict to the Bible. They studied, the Old Testament scriptures. They studied them. They could cite them. If we want to make a comparison today, the Pharisees would have been the conservatives of the day, while the Sadducees would have been the liberals. Would have been they would have been more progressive. But notice here, because this always baffles me about this Sadducees. They said that they hold to the belief of Moses, the writings of Moses. And what is interesting about the writings of Moses, how can you believe the writings of Moses, but yet deny any kind of, they didn't believe in the resurrection, they didn't believe in spirits. And I want to say, I don't think they believed in angels. So he says, they say there is no resurrection. So then he says, so some of the Sadducees who say there was no resurrection came up and questioned him. And this is another thing, they didn't believe in the resurrection. So life, the God raising the dead on the last day for judgment. They said there is no resurrection. When you die, that's it. But they said, teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother, if a man's brother has a wife and he dies childless, his brother should take his wife and produce offspring to his brother. Now, this was a kind of a crazy belief. It even predates the law. It got incorporated into the law, but it predates the law, where this belief that, okay, in order to keep up a man's seed. If he dies before he has a male heir, then his brother was to go in and sleep with his wife. Okay, sleep with his wife, and once she got pregnant, then that child would be raised in the name of the dead brother, and that was the that was the the, um, the custom. And as I said, it also got engrafted into the law. We see this with Judah in the book of Genesis, when he went and uh, his son, uh, ungodly sons, I'm going to say, his ungodly sons, and I'm trying to think. Well, you hear the story about his first two sons that God killed. One spilled his seed. Well, let me go back. Judah goes to the pagan town, and whatever reason, he leaves his father. He leaves the clan, and there's like a 20-year period where he kind of just goes off to himself. And in doing that time, he marries a Gentile woman, and he began to have children with this woman. And so the first one died, and then the second one, so the second son, he says, okay, well, the daughter-in-law was named Tamar. So, okay, he told the second son, hey, go in, raise up seed to your brother. He goes in, instead of, as they're having sex, instead of, you know, ejaculating to Tamar, he spills the seed. Boom, he drops dead. God kills him. Then the same thing with the second son. Boom, he drops dead. So then his youngest son, he says, okay, kind of young at the time. And he says, I'll tell you what, wait till he grows up, and then we'll raise up seed. Except, Judah did not do that. And when he got grown, she's noticing, okay, hey, where is the brother, so I can kind of keep the seed going? And she tricks Judah by dressing up as a prostitute. Then Judah gets her pregnant, and when they found out, they said, Tamar, man's been messing around. She gets pregnant. He was like, oh my God, I can't believe that. And he was righteously indignant. And he said, bring her here so that I can stone her. But she had given him kind of a sign, because he thought she was a prostitute. He said, well, just give me your signet and, a couple of items that identify Judah. And he says, I am pregnant by the man who owns these things. And when Judah saw that, he go, ooh, okay. All right. So, so that's the story. Now, so this is the kind of this is where this is coming from. So now they concocted this story. It says, if a man's brother has a wife and dies childless, his brother should take the wife and produce offerings for his brother. Okay. He said, now there were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and died without children. Also the second, the third took her. In the same way, all 7 died and left no children. Finally, the woman died too. And in the resurrection, therefore, whose wife would the woman be? For 7 had married her. And I thought you could tell that they just kind of knew they got Jesus. Like, we got him now, right? So, verse 34, Jesus told them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are counted worthy to take part in the age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. But they cannot die anymore, because they are like angels and are sons of God. Since they are the sons of the resurrection, Moses even indicated in the passage about the burning bush that the dead are raised when he called, that the dead are raised where he calls, I'm trying to read that verse 37 again. Moses indicated in the passage about the burning bush that the dead are raised when he calls the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, because all are living to him. And so when some of the scribes answered, "Teacher, you have spoken well," and they no longer dare to ask him anything. I'm going to come back next time and I'm going to kind of unpack this a little more, because notice here, God gives us another glimpse, life after death, right? The foolish Sadducees, which thought they caught Jesus, like, oh, in heaven, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be like the housewives of Atlanta or something like that in heaven, where you got 7 wives. And so then, you know, and let me just say this, and I am being funny. No, this is not Islam. Because the Islam, it was 70 virgins, but I digress. All right, guys, I'm going to pick this up next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.